Sometimes we have two sets of data that we want to compare, but the magnitude of the values in the different series are so different from each other. However, Excel makes it pretty easy to compare with charts. Let's go ahead and take this data here with units sold and total transactions and insert a chart off of that. We'll go ahead and let's see what the recommended charts are. Okay, that's fine. Let's just go ahead and do this clustered column chart right next to each other. And you can see that we can barely see the units sold because the magnitude of the total transaction is so much greater than that of units sold. So if we wanted to change this, we could click on one of the series. It doesn't really matter which one. And we can come over to the series options here. And we can, once that's selected, go ahead and switch it to a secondary access. Now the problem with that is that the data is overlapping, so we can't really see what's going on. We might be able to space them out, but better yet, we can change the chart type for a specific series. We can do that by right-clicking and changing series chart type. And then it has some suggestions for us. We can come up here, click on each of those. We still have the same problem because neither one of these are on a secondary access. But this one here says, oh, let's put the total transactions on a secondary access for a line chart, and we'll leave the units sold as the clustered column. Let's click OK there. Oh, that looks much better, and we can easily compare the units sold to the total transactions. Of course, we could put labels and other things on here if we wanted to. And of course, we wouldn't forget our chart title. But it's something that I think you'll come across very often, adding those secondary axes that are so useful in making comparisons. In Excel, we love to have data, and from that data, we can identify trends that exist in the data. We can actually visualize those trends very easily with charts and adding trend lines in charts. But if we were just going to calculate the trend lines ourselves, we might do something like this. So over here, we have a month, January, February, all the way through December. And we have data for the first 10 months of the year. And we'll use, the month number as our X. And for our Y, this is our actual production numbers. You can see, based on this visualization, that we have a general upward trend over the year. Well, from the actual Y and that X, what period we're in, we can actually generate a likely predicted Y. And so how do we do that? Well, essentially, we can use some formulas to come up with the slope and the intercept for our equation for that line. And so you can see here that our line crosses what looks like at 514, and every period we increase by about 53. And of all the existing data, that accounts for 67% of the variance that we have. Again, this isn't a stats class, but if I expect most of you have taken stats, you'll remember the whole idea with predictions and trend lines and other things. So Excel gives us some formulas that allow us to do that. In this case, this is an array formula to find a line estimate and then get the R-square off of certain data. Now, we can also then, based on this formula, predict what's going to happen in period 11 and period 12 based on what we've seen in the past. There are other ways to forecast straight from the data without having to come up with the equation ourselves, and that is use the forecast, and you basically feed it the appropriate data to predict the next period. So here, B12, that's the next period based on everything that's happened up to that point, all the values that we have up to that point. Well, charts actually make this very easy to do. We can actually create a chart, plot it, and then simply add a trend line and reveal the predictions, including the equations for us. And we can use other types of trend lines as well. Okay, let's go ahead and get to it. Let's grab some data here and insert a chart based on this data. So we'll insert and we'll come over here. Now, you could just select a line chart here. Our periods are evenly spaced, our x-axis is evenly spaced, so a line chart would work for this problem. But I suggest that you get in the habit of using a scatter chart instead, because that can account for unequal spacing on the x-axis. So we'll go ahead and do that instead, and if we want, we can put lines between them. Okay, and then once we have our scatter chart there, we can easily add a trend line to it. So we can right-click on our series, and we can simply add a trend line. And that brings us some options over here under our series or trend line options now that we have a trend line. It can be linear, which is kind of what we have here. And if you'll notice down here, we can actually display the equation on the chart, so we can get our slope and also the intercept there. And then we can also display the r squared. And if we want, then we can move this around and make it larger or do what we want with it. Now, you'll also notice that this trend line option allows us to forecast a certain number of periods into the future. So if we wanted to, we could simply forecast 2 more periods into the option and see approximately where we'd be, or during which period would cross a certain value there. So that's pretty awesome. Now we can also change the type of trend line that we add: exponential, logarithmic, polynomial. Depending on the type of data that we have, we might choose a different type of trend line. But for our purposes here, we'll stick with just linear. So I'll often use a chart to create trend lines to get this information rather than writing out the formulas, because it is so easy. All right, I hope you've enjoyed learning how to work with charts in Excel, and that you'll make it your own by using them and beautifying the charts that you create and use at work, your internship, or other opportunities that you might have.